The door shut behind her like a verdict. No witnesses allowed. No mercy scheduled, just a desk, two pale faces, and a piece of iron waiting to eat her voice. I've seen traps dressed up as conversations. That's how the powerful like it. They don't raise their hands first. They raise a question. They let you answer it wrong. Dina stood in the study with her back straight because that's all she still owned. Her wrists weren't chained. Not yet. But the air in that room was already doing the job. Heavy. Still. Like it knew what was coming. On one side, Master Bellamy sat like a man balancing ledgers, not lives. On the other, his wife stood close enough to whisper into his decisions. She had that kind of influence. Quiet, dangerous, the kind that doesn't need to shout. And behind them, on a hook like a tool you'd use on livestock, hung the iron. Dina's eyes went to it for half a second. That was all it took. Her stomach dropped like she'd stepped off a roof. Bellamy didn't bother with greetings. "You been around my boy?" His voice was calm. That's how you know it's real. A man yelling is still deciding. A man speaking low already decided yesterday. Dina kept her gaze down the way survival teaches you. "Yes, sir." His wife's mouth tightened like she'd been holding poison under her tongue. "Stories," she said, spat the word without spitting. "You been filling him up with your ideas." Dina didn't flinch, not because she wasn't afraid, because fear doesn't help when the room is already locked. "I'll tell you something about cages. The worst ones don't start with iron, they start with attention." Dina had been noticed. That's the first step to getting punished in a world built on ownership. You can work hard, you can work quiet, you can even work invisible. But the moment somebody looks at you and sees more than labor, you become a problem that needs solving. She didn't set out to be a problem. She didn't set out to be bold. She set out to keep people breathing. Nights in the quarters when backs ached and spirits wore thin, Dina used to make the air feel lighter. Not with sermons, not with speeches, with stories, short ones, smart ones. Ones that let folks remember they still had minds. Not loud either. Loud gets you hunted. Dina's gift was control. She knew when to lean in, when to pause, when to drop a line so soft you had to listen with your whole body. The elders loved her for it. The children followed her voice like it was a lantern, and that's what made her dangerous. Because a voice can do what a blade can't. A blade cuts one man. A voice wakes up 10. Now the boy, Thomas Bellamy, 13 and already trained to believe the world belonged to him, but soft enough to still feel guilt about it. That kind of child is a storm waiting on instructions. He was lonely. Not the kind of lonely that comes from being alone. The rich don't get that kind much. His loneliness came from being surrounded by people who only saw him as a future master. His father demanded perfection like it was oxygen. His mother smothered him with love that felt like a rope. Tutors barked Latin. Brothers mocked him for bleeding feelings. So he did what lonely people do, he wandered. And one afternoon he ended up behind the stable crying into his own hands like he was ashamed of being human. Dina heard it. She should have kept walking. Every instinct in her body told her to keep walking, but Dina had a weakness. She couldn't ignore a child in pain. That's not softness, not where she lived. That's a liability. She approached slow, made sure he saw her before he could claim she surprised him. She kept distance like it was law. "Young master," she said, careful, "you hurt." He snapped his head up like he'd been caught stealing. He looked at her like she was both help and danger. "Go away," he hissed, then broke again, tears returning like they owned him. Dina didn't touch him, didn't sit beside him, didn't cross that line, but she spoke. Not kindly, not motherly, strategically. "You can keep crying," she told him, soft. "Or you can hand that hurt to a story and let it carry some of it." He didn't know what she meant, not at first. Then she gave him one, a small tale about a creature everybody underestimated. Not a hero, not a king, something overlooked, something clever, something that survived bigger predators by thinking ahead. She made him laugh. That was the first theft. She stole his despair for a few minutes. And the boy in that moment did what boys do when they find relief they can't get at home. He came back, not openly, not foolish, but often. Near the kitchen, near the garden, near wherever Dina's hands were busy and eyes were lowered. And she told him more, always measured, always aware. She never forgot the difference between them. She never called him anything but what she was forced to call him. She never spoke to him like an equal. You do that, you end up in a grave. But still, something shifted. He started looking at her like she was a person. And that's where the real trouble began. Because the system they lived under didn't just survive on whips and chains, it survived on a belief. A lie repeated until it felt like nature. The lie said people like Dina were less than human, and the boy started doubting the lie. One summer day, the mistress caught it. Not the talking, not the laughing, the connection. She saw her son smiling at an enslaved woman like the world hadn't told him not to. And you could see it happen behind her eyes. First confusion, then recognition, then that darker thing, jealousy. Not jealousy like romance, jealousy like power. She realized Dina had access to her son's mind in a way she didn't. She realized Dina could give him something that wasn't bought, wasn't commanded, wasn't forced. A moment of freedom. You ever watch a person realize they're losing control and decide they'd rather break the thing than share it? That's what happened. That night, while the plantation slept, the mistress went to her husband's study and poured poison into his ear. Not dramatic, not hysterical, just steady, certain. She's turning him, her words implied. Bellamy didn't care about stories. He cared about structure, about order, about the machine running smooth. But even a man like him understands cracks. If his heir sees enslaved people as fully human, what happens later? Sympathy turns into hesitation. Hesitation turns into weakness. Weakness turns into loss. And men like Bellamy don't lose, not on their own land. So he chose a punishment that didn't just hurt Dina. It warned everybody watching. Next morning, the overseer, Cyrus Webb, came for her like he was collecting a tool from the shed. No explanation, no warning, just a grip on her arm that said she wasn't walking by choice. Dina's daughter saw it. Mabel, 8 years old, small frame, big eyes, the kind of eyes that learn too early. The child didn't cry, not right away. She stared. Because children in that world learned that sound could cost you. Dina tried to give her a look that meant, "I'll be back, I'm fine, don't let them see you break," but she could feel the lie in her own face. Webb dragged her across the yard. People watched and kept working, not because they didn't care, because caring out loud is how you volunteer for pain. Inside that study, Bellamy didn't circle the truth. He laid it down clean. You forgot what you are. Dina's mouth wanted to answer, wanted to say something that could save her dignity even if it couldn't save her body, but she swallowed it, because dignity doesn't keep you breathing in a room like that. Timing does. "I didn't mean," she started. Bellamy cut her off with a hand, sharp, final. "You don't speak to my son again." The mistress stepped in closer, eyes cold like she'd been waiting to say the next part her whole life. "And you won't be speaking much at all." That's when Webb moved. He reached behind the door and brought the iron forward like he was presenting a gift. Dina's knees almost gave. She felt the room tilt, felt her body betray her before any person did. She looked at the muzzle and understood the true design of it, not to kill, to keep you alive while it takes everything that makes you you. She tried one last play, the oldest play in the world. She brought her daughter into it. "I got a child," she said, voice breaking but still hers. "She needs my words." The mistress didn't blink. "Your child needs to learn," she replied, "that you don't get to have words." Bellamy nodded once like he'd approved a shipment, and Webb stepped closer. That iron was inches away now, close enough for Dina to smell it. Old rust, old blood, old suffering baked into metal. Close enough to know other mouths had died behind it. She backed up without meaning to, heel touching the wall. No exits. No allies. Just a key hanging from Webb's neck like a trophy and a lock waiting to click. And right before the iron touched her face, Dina heard something outside the door. A child's small footsteps running across wooden boards, too fast, too desperate, Mabel. And in that split second, Dina realized the punishment wasn't finished being designed. They weren't just coming for her voice. They were positioning to take her daughter next. The iron kissed her skin and the room went quiet like everybody wanted to hear the moment she stopped being herself. Webb didn't rush it. Men like him never do. Cruelty is their craftsmanship. He set the cage over her mouth and nose, pulled the bands around her head, then pressed that inner bar down like he was pinning a snake. Dina's body bucked. Her throat fought. Her tongue tried to rise and couldn't. The lock snapped shut behind her skull. That little click sounded like a gate closing on a life. She tried to speak anyway, tried to force one clean word through the metal. What came out wasn't language. It was a broken sound that didn't belong to any person. Bellamy didn't even look pleased. He looked efficient. "You'll wear it," he said, like he was assigning her to carry water. "It comes off when I say it comes off." The mistress stepped closer, not to help, not to gloat, to make sure Dina saw her eyes. "This is what happens," she said softly, "when you forget your place." Dina wanted to spit, couldn't, wanted to scream, couldn't, and then they walked her out. The yard hit her like bright punishment. All that morning light, all those eyes. Folks froze in their tasks for half a second, then went back to moving. Not because they didn't feel it, because on plantations, watching too hard was a confession. Dina turned her head and found Mabel in the doorway of the kitchen house. The child held a potato like she'd forgotten what it was. Her face was pale, lips parted, eyes wide with a terror too big for 8 years. "Mama," Mabel breathed. Dina tried to answer. All she gave her was that muffled, ruined sound. Webb shoved Dina forward, and Mabel's face cracked open like something inside her got stolen. That's the part they don't tell you about power. It doesn't just punish you. It teaches everybody who loves you to be afraid of loving you in public. They pushed Dina back to the quarters like they were returning damaged property. She stumbled because the weight threw off her balance, because the cage changed how she breathed, because panic kept jumping up in her chest like a trapped animal. That first night, she learned what a muzzle really does. It doesn't only steal words, it steals time. She couldn't sleep. Every position felt wrong. The bars pressed into her cheeks. The bands cut into her temples. If she turned her head the wrong way, she couldn't draw a full breath. She lay staring at the dark boards above her, listening to everyone else try to pretend the world still made sense. Mabel curled beside her, shaking. One small hand clutched the fabric near Dina's waist like holding cloth could keep a mother from disappearing. Dina put her palm over the child's fingers. It was the only language left. Later in the night, an older woman, Esther, came and sat close. Not to talk. Talking didn't fix anything. She came to witness. That matters in places like that. Esther reached out and wiped the tears collecting along the bars, gentle like she was tending a wound. Then she leaned in and whispered into Dina's ear, so low it barely made the air move. "They can cage your mouth," Esther said. "But don't you let 'em cage what you know." Dina stared forward, tears slipping anyway, because she did know. She knew the Bellamys didn't do this just because a boy laughed. They did it because laughter leads to questions. Questions lead to doubt. Doubt breaks empires. And Dina had been the spark without meaning to be. Morning came with a bell that didn't care who hurt. Dina stood, swayed, found the wall with her fingertips and steadied herself. Mabel tried to help, small hands under Dina's elbow like she could hold her whole world up. They moved with the others toward work. No one spoke to Dina directly. Some looked away. Some glanced too long, then snapped their eyes down, scared of being seen caring. In the kitchen house, they gave Dina the simplest labor. Carry water, carry wood. Carry waste, back and forth, back and forth. Work that required hands, not voice. Work that kept her visible, a warning on 2 legs, and every morning, right on schedule, Webb showed up with the key. He made a little show of it, not loud, not dramatic, just deliberate. He'd unlock the device, let it open like a cell door, and place a bowl in her hands. 10 minutes. That was the mercy. 10 minutes to eat with a jaw that forgot how to move. 10 minutes while the tongue tingled half numb from being pinned down all day. 10 minutes while fear sat next to her like a second bowl. The first time she tried to chew. Pain slapped her so hard her eyes watered. She switched to swallowing fast, drinking thin cornmeal like it was water, choking because her throat wasn't ready for speed. Webb watched her the way a man watches a mule learn a new harness. "Time," he'd say, and the key would turn again. Click, small sound, big ruin, days folded into weeks. Dina got thinner, her cheekbones sharpened, her wrists looked like they could snap. The skin under the band stayed irritated, raw, always on fire. Her teeth started feeling loose in her gums. Her jaw didn't open all the way anymore even when the muzzle did. And the worst part wasn't the pain, it was the silence inside her head. Dina had always lived in full sentences, in stories, in rhythm, in lines that could lift a room. Now her thoughts started shrinking down into single words. Water, work, hungry, pain, again. That's how they unmake you, not with one big strike, with daily reductions. Mabel saw it. And Mabel refused to accept it. At first, it was just watching. The child studying her mother like she was reading a book written in bruises and breath. Then one night in the quarters, Mabel leaned close and whispered, "Mama, can you hear me?" Dina made the smallest hum she could manage. Not a word, just a sound. Mabel took that hum like it was gold. "I'm gonna ask you things," the girl said. "You blink once for yes, twice for no." Dina blinked once. "Are you hurting?" One blink, "Is it your head?" One blink, "Your jaw." One blink slower. Mabel swallowed hard. Her small hand found Dina's. "I'm gonna learn you," she whispered, "even if they don't want me to." That right there, that was rebellion, not loud, not dramatic, the kind that lasts. Over the next weeks, Mabel built a language out of almost nothing. A glance to the left meant someone coming. A glance down meant danger nearby. A tight, sharp breath meant fear. A long breath meant exhaustion. Eyes closed for a beat too long meant "I love you." Other folks started noticing. They'd ask Dina a question, then look to Mabel when Dina answered with her eyes. The child became a bridge. And bridges are the first thing the powerful try to burn. Because once people realize silence can still communicate, the muzzle stops being a muzzle. It becomes a challenge. You could feel the plantation watching them. Not just Webb, not just the Bellamys, the whole place. Like a predator that's learned where the heartbeat is. Then one cool morning, months in, when work slowed just enough for trouble to roam, the mistress walked into the kitchen house. Thomas followed behind her like a shadow that hated what it belonged to. Mabel was scrubbing a pot. Dina was carrying vegetables from the cellar. The mistress didn't look at Dina first. She looked at Mabel. "Come here." The child froze. Her eyes flicked to her mother fast, asking permission, asking warning, asking for anything that could keep her from stepping into that woman's reach. Dina made a low sound behind the iron, a rough plea. The mistress ignored it like it was wind. Mabel walked forward, slow. The mistress studied the girl the way she studied cloth and silverware and anything else she owned. "I hear you're clever," she said. "I hear you can understand your mother." Mabel didn't answer right away. A pause, like she felt the trap closing but couldn't see the teeth. "I try," she whispered. The mistress nodded once, satisfied. "Good," she said. "Clever girls are useful in the main house." Dina's blood turned cold because she understood before the sentence finished. This wasn't promotion. This was separation. This was how you kill a language without touching the mouth. The mistress turned toward Thomas like she was showing him a lesson. "My son needs an attendant," she said. "Someone to keep his things, run errands, stay close." Then she looked back at Mabel. "You'll move today." Dina took one step forward, fast, forgetting the weight, forgetting the balance. She tried to place herself between them. The mistress's eyes sharpened. "Careful," she said, voice gentle as a knife. "You want more time in that device. I can make that happen." Dina stopped mid-step. That's the power imbalance right there. One woman could threaten a year of silence with a soft sentence. Mabel's face went tight. The child's eyes shone, not from tears yet, from understanding. Thomas stood there, older now, guilt sitting on his shoulders like a coat he couldn't take off. He opened his mouth like he might say something, then he shut it. And in that moment, Dina learned the second lesson of mercy. It disappears when it costs something. The mistress swept out. Mabel ran to Dina the second she could, wrapped her arms around her mother's waist like she was trying to hold her in place. Dina held the girl so hard her arms shook. She tried to speak through the bars, tried to push her love through iron. Nothing clean came out, but Mabel understood anyway because that's what they'd built together. "I love you. Stay sharp. Don't let them change you." Mabel pressed her face into Dina's stomach and whispered, I won't forget. Promises sound strong until you hear them in a place built for breaking them. That night, Dina lay on her pallet and reached for the child beside her out of habit. Her fingers found empty air. The quarters were full of bodies, full of breath, full of life continuing. And Dina had never felt more alone. Outside, somewhere past the walls, the main house doors closed for the night. And Dina knew, with the kind of certainty that comes before disaster, that the next move wasn't going to be about her anymore. It was going to be about Mabel, and the Bellamys had already decided what they wanted her to become. They took Mabel before sunrise. That's how you do it when you don't want resistance to gather strength. No goodbyes, no time to think. Just a knock that wasn't really a knock and hands already reaching for what they claimed belonged to them. Dina didn't see it happen. That was the point. She felt it. Mothers feel distance the way sailors feel storms. The air changes. The silence gets heavier. Something essential goes missing and your body notices before your mind does. By the time Dina reached the yard with her bucket, Mabel was already inside the big house, learning how to walk quieter, speak less, disappear better. That was the new lesson. Inside the main house, the rules were different, but the danger was sharper. Everything had edges. Every word carried consequences. Every look could be reported. Mabel was given a tiny room near the back stairs, a narrow bed, a wash basin, a schedule written into her bones by the end of the first day. Wake early. Move fast. Speak only when spoken to. Eyes down, hands ready, and never ever linger near the kitchen house, especially not near her mother. That order didn't need to be said twice. Back in the quarters, Dina worked like a machine running on memory. Carry, return, carry again. Her body moved because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling the space where her daughter used to be. She searched for Mabel with her eyes every chance she got. Through windows, across yards, between buildings. Sometimes she caught glimpses, a small figure moving fast, head lowered, arms full of linens or books. Each time Dina tried to speak with her eyes. Are you hurt? Are they feeding you? Do you remember me? Sometimes Mabel looked back just long enough to answer. I'm here, I'm scared, I remember. But those moments got shorter. Mrs. Hutchins, the housekeeper, noticed. She always noticed. Women like that survived by watching closely and caring selectively. The first punishment came quiet. Extra work, missed meals. A sharp grip on the arm delivered in a hallway with no witnesses. The message was clear. Connections were contraband. Mabel learned fast, too fast. Her face changed, smoothed out, became careful. The way children's faces do when they learn the wrong lessons early. Dina saw it happening and felt something inside her chest start to fracture. Because the muzzle hadn't just taken her voice. It had taken her reach. Months passed. Cold settled into the land. The plantation slowed just enough for thoughts to wander and resentment to harden. And Dina started noticing something else. She was being watched again. Not openly. Not the way Webb watched her when he wanted obedience. This was quieter. Bellamy passed her in the yard more often. The mistress lingered at windows longer than necessary. Overseers paused near the kitchen house under the excuse of supervision. They were counting her weight, her strength, her compliance. They were deciding how much she had left. Dina felt it the way old fighters feel the room before a hit is thrown. This wasn't over. They hadn't broken her the way they wanted to. And worse, she knew something they didn't. She knew what silence could still do. At night, alone on her pallet, she practiced moving her jaw, tiny movements, agonizing ones. She forced air past her throat in controlled patterns, learning how to shape sound without words. Not to speak yet, to prepare. Because she understood something now clearer than ever. As long as the muzzle stayed intact, they controlled the terms. But iron, no matter how cruel, is still just iron. And iron breaks. The thought settled in her mind and didn't leave. Not hope, not prayer, decision. One night Esther sat beside her again, older now, tired in ways only decades of survival can make you. Esther looked at Dina's eyes and saw something new there, not despair, focus. You thinking dangerous, Esther whispered. Dina closed her eyes once. Slow, deliberate, yes. Esther nodded like she'd expected it. Then you best be ready to pay for it, she said. Dina knew. She'd already started counting the cost. Because somewhere inside the big house, her daughter was learning how to vanish. And Dina had decided that if the only way to stop that was to destroy what remained of herself, then that's what she would do. The plantation slept that night thinking the lesson had been learned. It hadn't, it had just been delayed, and iron doesn't sleep. Pain teaches patience if it doesn't kill you first. Dina learned how to live inside it. Every night after the quarters went quiet, she tested the limits. Not reckless, not wild, small movements, controlled ones, a tilt of the jaw, a press of the tongue. A breath held just long enough to remind her lungs they still belonged to her. The iron punished every attempt, sharp reminders, white flashes behind her eyes. She welcomed it. Pain meant feedback, feedback meant information, and information is leverage. That's how minds like hers survived. You don't fight the wall head-on, you learn where it's weak. During the day, she became invisible again, not the punished spectacle anymore, just another body carrying weight. Another pair of hands moving where they were told. That worried them more than her resistance ever had. Bellamy liked clean outcomes, clear victories. A woman who breaks quietly fits the ledger. Dina wasn't breaking quietly, she was adapting. Mabel felt the change before she understood it. From the windows of the main house, she saw her mother differently now. Not just thinner, not just quieter, sharper. Dina's eyes followed patterns, counted guards, measured distances. Marked who lingered where and for how long. When their gazes met, Dina didn't ask questions anymore. She sent instructions: be ready, watch who listens, remember everything. Mabel obeyed the way only frightened, intelligent children can. She watched the house, learned its moods, learned when Mrs. Hutchins was distracted, learned when Thomas's guilt made him look away instead of report. She learned where the doors creaked, which stair boards complained, which hallways swallowed sound, and that scared her, because children know when adults are preparing to do something that can't be undone. The night it happened didn't announce itself. No thunder, no screams, just a stillness so complete it felt intentional. Dina waited until the quarters breathed in unison, until even Esther's slow movement settled. She stood. Her legs trembled not from fear but from hunger and months of imbalance. She steadied herself with the wall, feeling the rough wood against her palms. She positioned herself carefully, not rushed, not frantic, calculated. She placed her hands on either side of the iron cage and leaned forward, pressing her forehead to the wooden beam. For a moment she stayed there, thinking of Mabel's face the last time she held her, thinking of stories left unfinished, thinking of how silence had been used as a weapon against her. Then she moved. The first impact rang through her skull like a bell struck underwater. Pain detonated behind her eyes. Her knees buckled but didn't give. Someone gasped. She pulled back and hit the wall again. This time something shifted, not much, but enough. Warmth flooded her mouth. Blood, hands reached for her, voices rose, stop her. She tore free, fueled now by something past pain. The third strike was the one that mattered. Metal screamed. The bar inside snapped with a sound like bone breaking. The cage buckled inward, cutting into her cheeks. Blood poured freely now, slick and hot. She grabbed the twisted iron with shaking hands and pulled. Skin tore, flesh protested. Her body begged her to stop. She didn't. The muzzle came away in pieces, clattering to the dirt like a defeated thing. For a second, Dina stood there swaying, blood-soaked, barely upright. Then she opened her mouth. Her jaw screamed. Her tongue shook. Her voice came out ruined, scraped raw by months of captivity, but it came out. "My name," she said, words broken but alive, "is Dina." Every head turned. She swallowed, forced air, forced sound. "I am her mother." That was as far as she got before the world tilted and went black. When she woke days later, her face was wrapped, her mouth burned with every breath, and Esther's eyes were above her, wet but steady. "You still here?" Esther said. Dina nodded weakly. Somewhere beyond the quarters, bells rang, orders traveled, decisions were being made without her input. Bellamy would not let this go unanswered. Broken property was one thing, defiance that spoke was another. And somewhere in the main house, Mabel felt it too, the shift, the gathering response. The kind that only comes after someone embarrasses power in front of witnesses. They had taken the muzzle. Now they would collect the debt. Bellamy didn't come down to the quarters. Men like him never did their own dirty arithmetic. He sent word instead. That's how you knew the decision had weight. 3 days after the iron shattered, 2 overseers stood at the door while Esther stitched Dina's face with hands that trembled from anger, not fear. "Master says she lives," one of them muttered like he was disappointed. "Lives, not forgiven, not spared." Aloud, "They didn't put the muzzle back on. That would have raised questions." Northern eyes were drifting south. Too many whispers, too much smoke for another fire. Instead, they did something quieter. They isolated her. No kitchen work. No shared tasks. No places where people lingered long enough to listen. They made her carry again. Alone, from dawn to dark. Water, wood, slop. Back and forth like a ghost haunting its own sentence. Her face healed wrong. Scar tissue pulled at her jaw. Her voice never came back clean. Every word sounded like it had to climb out of rubble, but she spoke anyway, not loudly, not often, only when it mattered. She spoke to Mabel when she finally saw her again. The girl broke rules to run to the quarters the first night she heard her mother was alive. Mrs. Hutchins chased her halfway before deciding it wasn't worth explaining. Mabel froze when she saw Dina, the scars, the swelling, the blood-dark lines stitched into skin. "Mama," she whispered, afraid the word might hurt her. Dina reached out slow. Her hand shook as it touched the child's cheek. "Still here," she rasped. Mabel collapsed into her arms, crying the kind of cry that had been stored too long. "I thought you died," she said between sobs. "Tried," Dina answered honestly. "Didn't finish." They didn't get long. They never did, but Mabel heard her mother's voice. Broken, different, still hers. After that, Dina became something else on the plantation, not a storyteller, a reminder. The children watched her mouth move carefully now, hanging on to fragments. The adults leaned in when she spoke because every word cost her something. She told them what happened, not dramatic, not embellished, just truth. And truth has weight when it's paid for in blood. When Sherman's fire finally came, it came fast. Flames took the big house first, then the outbuildings, then the lies stacked inside them. Dina stood with Mabel and watched the place that had tried to erase them turn to ash. Mabel looked up at her. "Will you tell stories again?" Dina thought for a long time. "Different ones," she said, "true ones." Because stories don't just entertain, they warn, they remember, they survive. And somewhere in that smoke the iron lost its last hold. But scars don't fade just because the house burns. They travel, they get passed down. And if you listen close enough, real close, you can still hear them breathing where silence was supposed to win. Freedom didn't arrive like a celebration. It crept in like an uneasy ceasefire. The fire took the house. The uniforms vanished. The bells stopped ringing. But the damage stayed right where it was, inside flesh and memory. Dina walked away from the plantation with a limp and a voice that sounded like it had survived a war, because it had. People listened differently now, not because she was loud, because she was. Every word came slow, measured, chosen. When she spoke, folks leaned in the way they lean in around someone who's already proven they'll bleed for the truth. Mabel stayed close, always watching, always learning. She had seen what power did when it felt embarrassed. She had seen what it cost to push back. That kind of education doesn't fade. They moved through Reconstruction towns where promises were made quick and broken quicker, where old masters pretended to be new men, where badges replaced whips but the thinking stayed the same. Dina warned people quietly. Different chains, she'd say, same hands. Some listened, some didn't, and some learned the hard way, because the muzzle didn't die with the iron, it just changed shape. Years passed. Dina aged fast. Pain never left her jaw. Cold weather made her scars burn like they were still fresh. But she kept speaking, in fragments, in whispers, in half-stories that carried full weight. She told children what silence was used for. She told mothers what watching costs. She told men that power hates witnesses more than rebels. And Mabel grew sharp, too sharp to be fooled by smiles, too quiet to be underestimated. She watched sheriffs. She watched judges. She watched men who said law the way Bellamy used to say order. One night years later, Mabel came home late, too late. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, with control. "They're building something," she told her mother, "not plantations, systems." Dina nodded like she'd been waiting for that sentence. "Told you," she rasped. "Iron don't vanish, it learns." Mabel swallowed. What do we do? Dina looked at her daughter, really looked, saw the woman she'd become, saw the cost already etched in her posture. We don't scream, Dina said. That's what they expect. She leaned closer, voice low, rough, deliberate. We remember, we tell it right, and we make damn sure they never get to say it didn't happen. Outside, somewhere down the road, men were meeting, planning, renaming old cruelty and selling it as progress. They thought the witnesses were gone. They were wrong. Because once a voice survives iron, it doesn't belong to silence anymore. It belongs to the future, and the future was already listening. Years later, long after the plantation smoke settled into history, people still lowered their voices around Dina. Not out of fear. Out of respect. She didn't move fast anymore. Didn't need to. Power like hers doesn't hurry. It waits, it watches. It remembers faces, patterns, habits. It knows who talks too much and who never talks at all. When she spoke now, it wasn't to crowds, it was to individuals, one at a time. A woman thinking about trusting the wrong man. A boy mistaking silence for safety. A preacher confusing peace with obedience. Dina would lean in, scarred mouth closed, breath rough, and say just enough. Not advice, not warning, truth. The kind that sits with you later when the room is empty. Mabel became her extension. Where Dina's body couldn't go, Mabel's mind did. She learned how information moved, how favors were traded, how laws bent quietly before they ever snapped loud. They saw it coming before most people did. The new systems, the renamed chains, the same hunger for control, just wearing cleaner clothes. One evening a man came looking for Dina, well-dressed, polite, careful with his words, too careful. He spoke about reconciliation, about progress, about letting old wounds rest. Dina listened without interrupting. That's how you spot a lie. You let it finish talking. When he was done, she studied his hands, clean, untouched by consequence. You want silence, she said finally, voice low and torn but steady. Not peace. The man smiled thin. I want stability. Dina nodded once. That's what they always want, she said, right before they hurt somebody. The smile faded. He left soon after, polite to the end. Mabel watched him disappear down the road. He'll be back, she said. Dina didn't answer right away. She looked at the horizon, at the way the light fell, at how history liked to repeat itself when it thought no one was keeping score. Yes, she said at last, but next time he won't come alone. That night Dina sat awake, scars aching, jaw stiff, mind sharp. She knew the truth most people learn too late. Surviving the first cruelty doesn't mean you're done fighting it. It means you've been promoted to witness, and witnesses are dangerous. Somewhere out there, men were already deciding how to deal with that, and Dina, calm as ever, was already 3 moves ahead. The second visit came without knocking. Dina heard the wagon before she saw it. Different wheels, heavier load. Men who weren't used to waiting. She stayed seated. That unsettled them more than shouting ever could. 3 men stepped down, one familiar, 2 new, broad shoulders, hard eyes, the kind of men hired to finish conversations. They didn't introduce themselves, didn't need to. We need you quiet, the familiar one said, trying for calm. You've been stirring things. Dina tilted her head, slow, measured, like she was considering a chessboard only she could see. I don't stir, she said, voice gravel and restraint. I remember. One of the new men shifted his weight, hand near his belt, impatient. That's the problem, he muttered. Mabel stood in the doorway behind her mother, still, watching, learning who showed their fear first. The familiar man sighed like this had gone farther than planned. There are ways, he said, lowering his voice, to make remembering harder. Dina finally stood, not fast, not dramatic, just enough to remind them she'd already survived worse men than this. You already tried iron, she said. You already tried taking my child. You already tried erasing me. She stepped closer, close enough they could smell the old scars, the history that didn't scare easy. All you did, she finished, was teach me how you think. Silence stretched, dangerous now. The men exchanged looks, calculations shifting. This wasn't a woman begging to be spared. This was a woman documenting them in real time. The familiar man took a step back. This isn't over, he said. Dina nodded once. I know, she replied. That's why I'm still talking. The wagon rolled away slower than it arrived. Mabel exhaled only after it disappeared down the road. "They're coming again," she said. Dina looked at her daughter, eyes steady, voice low. "Yes," she said, "and next time they won't be asking." She turned back toward the darkening horizon, scars pulling tight as night settled in. Somewhere out there, power was regrouping, and somewhere closer than anyone realized, witnesses were gathering. The board was set, and the next move would cost blood. The waiting was worse than the visits. That's how pressure works. It doesn't rush you. It lets your mind do the damage first. Dina felt it in the pauses between days, in the way strangers lingered too long at crossroads, in the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, then restarted softer, careful. Fear travels faster than truth, but truth lasts longer. She used the time, not to hide, to prepare. She spoke to people who knew how to listen without reacting. Men who had learned silence in prisons and fields. Women who carried grief like a second spine. Folks who understood that survival wasn't passive, it was strategic. No meetings, no names written down, no speeches, just memory passing hand to hand. Mabel became the runner, not reckless, precise. She carried fragments of Dina's words to the right ears, not all of them, never all. You don't give anyone the whole map. That's how informants get made. One night, Esther, older now, bones tired, eyes still sharp, came with news that didn't surprise Dina at all. "They saying you dangerous," Esther whispered, "saying folks should keep distance." Dina gave a small, broken smile. "That means it's working." Esther studied her. "They won't let this stand." Dina nodded. "Neither will we." The final warning came disguised as mercy. A letter, polite, carefully worded, offering relocation, a small sum. Safety somewhere far away where her name didn't carry weight. Exile with manners. Mabel read it aloud, hands tight on the paper. "They want you gone," she said. "They want silence," Dina corrected. "Distance is just how they package it." Mabel looked up. "If we stay." "They escalate," Dina finished. "If we leave, they rewrite." She reached out and took the letter, folding it once, then again. "They don't get to decide how my story ends." That night Dina didn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the road, listening to the dark the way hunters do. Her jaw ached, her scars pulled tight, her breath came slow and steady. She thought about the iron, not with fear, with clarity. They had taken her voice once and learned something dangerous in the process. That breaking her didn't erase the truth. It sharpened it. Somewhere down that road, men were preparing to make an example. Dina understood that examples work both ways. And when dawn came, pale and uncertain, she was already dressed, already ready, already resolved. Because if they were coming to end the story, she was going to make sure it was told first. They came at dawn, not loud, not rushed. The kind of arrival meant to look official when questions got asked later. 2 wagons this time, more men. One with a badge that still smelled new, like it hadn't learned shame yet. Another with eyes that never stopped moving, counting exits, counting bodies. Dina watched from the window. She didn't wake Mabel, that was the play. If fear was coming, it was coming for her first. The knock landed heavy. Not asking, informing. She opened the door before they hit it again. That threw them off balance. "Morning," she said, voice torn but steady. "You boys lost." The man with the badge cleared his throat. "We need to talk." Dina stepped aside just enough to let them see inside. Nothing hidden, nothing chaotic, no sign of panic. Control rattles men who expect begging. They filed in, spread out. One near the door, one near the window, one pretending to read the room while really reading her. "You've been causing unrest," the badge said. "People are repeating things you said, things that don't help stability." Dina nodded slowly. "Truth rarely does," she replied. One of the men scoffed. Another tightened his jaw. The badge leaned closer. "This can go easy or it can go hard." Dina met his eyes. "You already tried hard," she said. "Didn't stick." Silence stretched. The wrong kind, the kind before a decision. From the back room, a floorboard creaked. Every head turned. Mabel. The men tensed instantly. One hand dropped to a weapon. Another man moved toward the hallway. Dina stepped forward fast this time. Just one step. She ain't part of this. The badge raised an eyebrow. Everyone's part of it. Dina smiled, not warm, not friendly. That's where you're wrong, she said. She's the reason you're careful. They didn't understand that yet, but they would, because Mabel wasn't coming out scared. She was coming out carrying something folded tight against her chest. Paper, names, dates, roots, things Dina had been quietly collecting. Things power never thinks the silenced are capable of holding. The badge saw it, his face changed. What's that? He demanded. Mabel didn't answer. She handed it to her mother. Dina took it slow, then looked back up. You see, she said, voice low, deliberate, iron taught me patience. Silence taught me memory. She tapped the papers once. And memory, she finished, is dangerous. Outside, another sound reached them. Footsteps, more than a few, neighbors, workers, witnesses, people who'd been listening longer than anyone realized. The men in the room exchanged looks, calculations collapsing. The badge stepped back. This ain't over, he said. Dina nodded. I know, she replied. That's why you leaving. They backed out, one by one, careful now. The wagons rolled away slower than they arrived. Dina closed the door. Her hands shook for the first time that morning. Mabel looked up at her. They'll come back different. Dina exhaled. Yes, she said. Next time they won't pretend. She looked at the papers, then at the door, then at the road beyond it. The game had shifted. And somewhere power was already deciding whether it could afford to let a woman who survived iron stay alive. The board wasn't finished. It was just getting honest. Power hates being cornered. It doesn't lash out right away. It waits. It looks for a quieter way to make you disappear. The days after the wagons left felt wrong. Too calm, too polite. No more visitors, no threats, no warnings. That's when Dina knew the real danger had started. She'd seen this before long ago on the plantation. When punishment didn't come fast, it came permanent. When noise stopped, plans had already been signed. She told Mabel to pack light. Only what you can carry and still run, she said. Mabel didn't argue. She'd outgrown disbelief. They split the papers, copies memorized, roots learned. Names spoken out loud until they lived in the body, not the page. Because paper burns, people don't. At night, Dina sat by the window again, jaw aching, scars tight, listening to the dark. Every sound mattered now. Every pause had weight. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of vanishing. That's the difference. One evening, Esther came with urgency in her walk and fear she didn't bother hiding. They saying you won't make winter, she whispered. Saying accidents happen to people who won't rest. Dina nodded slowly. Then winter's their deadline, she said, Mabel's fists clenched. We can leave tonight. Dina looked at her daughter for a long time. No, she said finally. If we run now, they chase. If we stay, they hesitate. Hesitate don't mean stop, Mabel said. Dina leaned closer, voice low, steady, dangerous in its calm. No, she agreed. It means they show their hand. Hands once exposed can be remembered. The night before the first frost, Dina didn't sleep at all. She sat at the table, back straight, breathing through pain that never really left, thinking about every man who ever believed silence meant surrender. She thought about iron, about how it failed. Just before dawn, footsteps approached the house again. Different this time. No wagons, no badges, just boots on dirt, spaced out, careful, professional. Mabel stood in the doorway, eyes sharp, breath controlled. They hear, she whispered. Dina stood slowly, every movement deliberate. Yes, she said, and this time they ain't here to talk. She opened the door herself. The men outside didn't hide their intent. Faces hard, hands ready, no paperwork, no excuses. One of them spoke first. You should have taken the offer. Dina stepped onto the threshold, scars catching the early light. I did, she replied. I offered you the truth. The man's jaw tightened. That's not what we came for. Dina nodded once. I know. Behind her, Mabel slipped out the back, moving exactly when planned, carrying memory into motion. The men stepped forward, and Dina didn't move. Because sometimes the final stand isn't about winning the fight. It's about making sure someone survives to tell it. And somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the road, beyond the reach of these men. The story was already running. The first blow never landed. That's what surprised them. They stepped forward expecting fear, expecting retreat, expecting a woman marked by scars to finally understand her place. Dina didn't flinch. She held their eyes one by one, slow, deliberate, the way you do when you want men to remember you later, when you want your face to stay with them longer than the job. "You already late," she said. One of them frowned. "Late for what?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because somewhere down the road boots were already moving faster than planned, because memory had already left the house and was breathing hard, running, refusing to be caught. The men reached for her then, hands rough, intent clear. Dina let them grab her. That was the second surprise. She went down without a fight, body heavy, jaw screaming, breath tearing through damaged muscle. Pain flared bright and familiar, but it didn't own her. She'd lived inside worse. As they dragged her toward the trees, one of them hesitated. "This don't feel right," he muttered. Another snapped back, "Just finish it." That's how orders sound right before history remembers names. They didn't see the neighbors at first, didn't hear the voices gathering, didn't feel the shift until it was too late to clean it up quiet. Someone shouted, someone else answered, footsteps multiplied. Lantern light cut through the gray. The men froze, realizing too late that they weren't alone anymore. Dina lay on the ground, blood in her mouth, chest burning, and smiled. Not because she was winning. Because she had already succeeded. One man stepped back, another cursed. A third scanned the tree line, calculating escape instead of dominance. Witnesses had arrived. That changed everything. They let her go, not gently, not kindly, but they let her go. They vanished into the trees with the urgency of men who knew the story wouldn't belong to them anymore. Dina stayed on the ground a long moment, breathing, counting, refusing to disappear. Hands reached for her. Careful ones this time. Familiar ones. Esther's voice trembled above her. "You alive?" Dina nodded slow. "Enough," she rasped. When she finally stood, supported on both sides, dawn had fully broken. The road was crowded now. Faces tight with anger, with fear, with something close to resolve. And far from there, miles away by now, Mabel didn't slow down. She carried names, dates, roots, proof. She carried her mother's voice, not broken this time, but sharpened by survival. Dina watched the road where her daughter had gone, then turned back to the people who had gathered. "They came to end it," she said. "Didn't work." Silence followed, heavy, intent. Someone asked the question that always comes after, "What now?" Dina wiped blood from her mouth, straightened as much as her body allowed, and answered without hesitation. "Now," she said, "we don't let them forget." And somewhere, far beyond that road, the people who thought iron and silence could finish, a woman began to understand something too late. The most dangerous voice is the one that survives. They never came back the same way again. That's how you knew the balance had shifted. No more groups in the open, no more half-official visits. Power doesn't repeat a failed move unless it's desperate. Instead, it adjusted, spread out, went quiet. That kind of quiet isn't peace. It's recalibration. Dina felt it in the weeks that followed, in the way riders passed too slow on the road, in the way unfamiliar faces appeared at markets and didn't buy a thing, in the way certain men stopped making eye contact altogether. She was being measured again, not as a problem, as a risk. Mabel didn't come back right away. That was the agreement. Distance was protection now. Every mile between them was a layer of armor. Word traveled back in pieces. The names reached the right ears. The roots matched other stories. The dates lined up with disappearances nobody had been allowed to talk about. Doors opened that weren't supposed to. Questions got asked that couldn't be buried clean. Not justice, pressure, enough to make men nervous, enough to make decisions harder. Dina stayed where she was. That was the sharpest move of all. She didn't hide, didn't run, didn't posture. She lived. Every morning she walked into town slow, scars visible, voice rough but present. She spoke to who she needed to speak to. She listened more than she talked. Letting people see her was part of the strategy, because a living witness is harder to erase than a martyr. One evening, as the sun dropped low and shadows stretched long, Esther sat beside her again. "You ever think about stopping?" Esther asked, "Just resting?" Dina looked at the road, empty for now, and shook her head. They don't rest, she said. Why should I? Esther nodded. She understood. That night Dina dreamed of iron again. Not the muzzle, a lock, turning, opening. When she woke there was a message waiting, no signature, no threat. Just a sentence written careful and cold, "We know where your daughter is." Dina folded the paper once. Then again, her hands didn't shake. That's the thing about surviving everything they throw at you. Eventually fear runs out of places to land. She stood, jaw aching, scars pulling tight, mind already 3 steps ahead. Because if they thought this was leverage, they'd misunderstood the game completely. And somewhere out there, someone was about to learn the oldest lesson of power the hard way. You should never threaten a woman who already broke iron with her face. They thought the note would bend her. That's always the mistake. Power assumes fear works the same on everyone. Dina read the sentence again, slow, careful, like it was a move placed on the board, not a threat. "We know where your daughter is." She didn't tear the paper, didn't burn it, didn't react the way men expect when they believe they've found the soft part. She sat down. That's when it gets dangerous. Fear makes people loud. Strategy makes them still. "They wouldn't write it," Esther said quietly, watching her. "Not if they already had her." Dina nodded. "It's bait." "For what?" "For me to move wrong." She stood and folded the paper into her pocket, not as a reminder but as evidence. Because notes like that weren't meant to be kept. They were meant to be erased with panic. Dina had outlived panic. That night she didn't send messages, didn't warn anyone, didn't rush. She waited, because men who threaten don't like silence. Silence makes them doubt their control, doubt makes them show their hand, and right on time the hand twitched. 2 days later a stranger appeared at the edge of town, not hiding, not watching, asking questions too openly, the wrong kind of confidence. Dina saw him before he saw her. He was clean, too clean, boots barely touched dirt, eyes trained but restless. An errand man. She let him notice her on his own. He hesitated, then approached like he'd practiced the walk in his head. "You Dina?" he asked. She didn't answer. That unsettled him. "I got a message," he said, "from people who want this to end quiet." Dina finally looked at him, really looked. "You don't look like a man who understands quiet," she said. His jaw tightened. "They're willing to trade," he replied. "Information for cooperation." Dina tilted her head slightly. That old habit, the one that made people feel examined. "You already gave me information," she said. "You told me you scared." He scoffed. "I told you they know where your girl is." Dina stepped closer, just enough. "If you knew," she said softly, "you wouldn't be standing here alone." That's when his confidence cracked. Just a little. She saw it, logged it. "Go back," she continued, voice low and even, "and tell them this." He swallowed. "Tell them I didn't survive iron to negotiate with cowards." The man stared at her, weighing pride against instinct. Then he turned and left. Dina watched him go, already certain of the next move. Because men who bluff about children don't stop there, they escalate, and escalation leaves trails. That night, miles away, Mabel sat in a borrowed room reading a list she'd memorized twice over. Names, places, faces, the kind of knowledge that turns threats into liabilities. She felt it too. The tightening, the approach. Mother and daughter, separated by distance, thinking the same thing at the same time. They're running out of patience. And when power runs out of patience, it stops pretending. Somewhere in the dark a decision was being made. Not whether to silence Dina, but how much noise they could afford when they tried. And this time the cost was going to be higher than they planned. Power didn't strike right away, it circled. That's how you recognize a predator that's been wounded. It stops charging, starts thinking, starts looking for the angle that won't bleed. Dina felt it in the delay. Too many quiet days, too many normal mornings. The kind of calm that only exists when violence is being scheduled. She stayed visible on purpose, walked the same roads, sat in the same places, let people see her scars in daylight, let rumors do their work without her feeding them. Because fear spreads faster when it doesn't know where to land. The message came just before nightfall on the 4th day, not written this time. Spoken, a boy from town, barely a teenager, nervous, eyes darting. "They said to tell you," he whispered, "that tomorrow changes things." Dina studied him, saw the way his hands shook. "Did they tell you how?" she asked. He shook his head fast. "No, ma'am, just tomorrow." She nodded, gave him a coin he didn't expect. "Go home," she said. "Lock your door." The boy ran. Dina sat alone as the sun sank low. Her jaw throbbed. Her scars tightened with the cold. She breathed through it like she always had. Tomorrow. That word carries weight when you've lived long enough. Tomorrow is when men convince themselves they're justified. She didn't pray, she reviewed. Who would move first? Who would hesitate? Who would pretend they didn't see? And who would survive? Far away, Mabel felt the same pressure hit her chest like a warning bell. The contacts she'd been working went silent all at once. That kind of silence only means one thing. Someone pulled rank. She packed immediately. Not clothes, proof. She knew where Dina would be in the morning, knew what her mother did when danger approached. She also knew this was different, because threats had turned into deadlines. Back in town, Dina stood and looked out over the road one last time before dark swallowed it. She wasn't running. She was positioning, if they wanted tomorrow. They were going to have to take it in the open, and open places have a way of remembering what happens in them. Night came heavy. Somewhere beyond the trees, boots shifted. Plans tightened. Orders got repeated twice to make them feel solid. And Dina, calm as ever, sat in the quiet with one final certainty settling in her bones. Whatever tomorrow brought. Someone was going to lose control. Morning didn't ease in, it snapped. The air felt wrong before the sun cleared the line of trees, too still, birds quiet like they'd been warned. Dina stepped outside anyway, same dress, same pace, same posture. She didn't carry a bag, didn't need one. Everything she needed was already inside her. The road was empty at first. Then the sound came, hooves, wheels. More than one wagon this time, but not dressed up. No badges, no papers. Just men who decided subtlety was finished. They stopped short of her gate, didn't rush her, didn't surround her. That told her everything. This wasn't an arrest, this was a message. The man who stepped down first wasn't familiar. That mattered, fresh hands, less history, easier to burn. "You've been warned," he said. "You didn't listen." Dina tilted her head slightly. The same motion she'd used her whole life when she was reading a situation deeper than it wanted to be read. "I listened," she said. "You just didn't like the answer." He smirked. "This don't end with talking." "No," Dina agreed. "It never does." More men fanned out now, blocking the road, blocking the trees, not tight. They wanted witnesses gone, not trapped. That's when Dina raised her voice, not loud, clear. "Y'all might want to slow down," she called. "This the part you don't walk back from." The man laughed, nervous edge to it. "You think folks gonna come save you?" Dina shook her head once. "No," she said. "I think folks already watching." That's when the sound shifted. Not hooves, footsteps, dozens of them from behind houses, from side roads, from places these men hadn't bothered to check because they never thought anyone would move without permission. Workers, neighbors, women with arms crossed, men standing too still to be accidental, witnesses. The man's smile died. "This ain't your business," he snapped at the crowd. A voice answered from somewhere behind Dina. "It became our business when you made it hers." Another voice followed, then another. The men with the wagons started recalculating. You could see it happen. The numbers no longer worked. Not clean, not quiet. And then, a shout from the far end of the road. A figure running hard. Smaller, faster. Mabel, she didn't slow down when she reached them, didn't hesitate. She pushed through the line of people and stopped beside her mother, chest heaving, eyes burning with purpose. In her hands, papers. She held them up. "They already know," she said loud enough for everyone. "Names, routes, payments, copies in 3 towns." The men froze. One of them cursed under his breath. That was the moment control broke, because threats only work when silence is guaranteed, and silence was gone. Dina looked at the man who'd come to end her and met his eyes one last time. "You should have taken the quiet ending," she said. "Now you part of the story." He didn't answer. He stepped back. Then another did. Then another. One by one they retreated, not running, not apologizing, leaving. The wagons turned around under 100 watching eyes. Dust settled slow after they disappeared. Dina exhaled, not relief, completion. Mabel slipped her hand into her mother's, gripping tight. "It's not over," she said quietly. Dina nodded. "No," she replied, "but it won't ever be the same again." The crowd didn't cheer, didn't celebrate, they just stayed. And that more than anything told Dina the truth. The muzzle had failed, the silence had failed. And from this point forward, anyone who tried to erase her would have to do it in the open, where stories don't die. They multiply. They didn't come back after that. Not because they found conscience, because the math stopped working. Power can handle resistance. What it can't handle is memory with witnesses attached. The town didn't turn heroic overnight. That's not how it goes. Folks didn't suddenly become brave or righteous. They became careful in a different direction. Doors stayed open longer. Conversations didn't end when Dina walked in anymore. Eyes didn't slide away. Presence changed, and that's how control erodes, not in explosions, in adjustments. Dina kept living where she was. Same house, same road, same rhythm. She understood something most people don't. If you survive long enough in one place, you become part of the ground, and the ground remembers who bled on it. Mabel stayed this time, not hiding, not running. She moved openly, papers no longer folded like secrets but stored where they could be found if needed. She built quiet connections, the kind that don't announce themselves but hold when pressure comes back around. Mother and daughter didn't talk much about what almost happened. They didn't need to. Some experiences don't want words, they want vigilance. One afternoon, months later, a stranger passed through town, slower than necessary, looking too hard at faces. He paused when he saw Dina, studying her scars like they were instructions. She met his stare without blinking. He moved on. That night, Dina sat on her porch, jaw aching, breath steady, listening to the world move forward despite everything that tried to stop it. Mabel joined her, quiet. "Do you think they'll try again?" she asked. Dina didn't answer right away. She watched the road, watched the dark settle into familiar shapes. "They always try," she said finally, "but not the same way, and never the same mistake twice." Mabel nodded. She de-learned that lesson early. Dina leaned back, scars pulling, voice low and certain. "They wanted silence," she said. "They got a record." The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far off, a train horn sounded, carrying names, carrying stories, carrying proof that movement never really stops. Dina closed her eyes, not in rest but in recognition. She had outlived iron. She had outlived silence. She had outlived the version of power that thought it could own memory. And now, whether they liked it or not, she was part of what came next. The game didn't end, but the rules had changed. Years passed, but the road never forgot her. New faces came through town, new laws, new uniforms, different language wrapped around the same instincts. Control always learns how to dress for the era it's in. Dina aged into stillness, the kind that watches more than it moves. Her scars faded in color but not in authority. People didn't ask her questions unless they were ready for answers that couldn't be taken back. She became a reference point. When something felt off, folks checked if Dina had noticed. When rumors started, they measured them against her silence. When men with power arrived smiling too wide, people waited to see if she stood or stayed seated. Because by then, everyone understood something simple. If Dina moved, it meant the ground was about to shift. Mabel left again, eventually. Not running, expanding. Carrying what she'd learned into places that pretended they didn't need it. She wrote nothing down that could be stolen. She taught others how to remember instead. That was the inheritance. Not anger, awareness. One evening, long after the sun dropped low, a wagon passed Dina's house slower than it needed to. Didn't stop, didn't speed up, just slow enough to be noticed. Inside, a man watched her through the slats. Dina met his eyes from the porch. Neither waved. The wagon kept moving. Mabel would have read that moment for what it was. A test, a measurement. Someone checking if the old stories still carried weight. Dina didn't follow the wagon with her eyes. She didn't need to. She already knew what came next when power starts checking old names. It means it's running out of new ones. Dina stood, joints stiff, jaw aching like it always did, and went inside as night settled heavy over the road. Behind her, the dark held its breath. Because somewhere out there, someone was deciding whether history was done with her, or whether they were about to make the same mistake all over again. The knock didn't come that night. That's what made it dangerous. When power hesitates, it's not done. It's measuring how loud the echo will be. Dina woke before dawn like she always did, jaw aching, scars pulling, instincts already alert. The air had that tight feeling again. Not panic, pressure, like something leaning just out of sight. She stepped onto the porch and looked down the road. Fresh tracks. Wagon wheels turned around sometime after midnight. They'd come close, stopped. Thought better of it, that told her everything. Someone out there wanted to erase a problem without creating another one. Someone was arguing that the old woman wasn't worth the trouble anymore. Someone else was saying the opposite. Dina smiled to herself just slightly. Division inside power is weakness, always has been. She went back inside and sat at the table, hands folded, breathing slow. If this was going to end, it would end one of two ways: quietly with lies, or loudly with witnesses. And she had already decided which ending she'd accept. By mid-morning, word reached her through a familiar channel. No names, no details, just enough. "They're talking again, about you." Dina nodded. "Tell them," she said, voice rough but steady, "I ain't moved." That message traveled faster than any threat. By evening, the road stayed empty, too empty. The kind of empty that means people are waiting for orders that haven't been signed yet. Dina sat on the porch as the sun dropped, the same way she had for years. Not hiding, not daring, present. Somewhere far off, a decision was being delayed. And delayed decisions have a way of turning reckless. Dina felt it settle into her bones. Whatever came next wouldn't be a warning, it would be a choice. And she was ready to see who made it first. The choice came disguised as routine. That's how the worst ones arrive. Late afternoon, sun low, same road, same dust. A single rider this time, not a wagon, not a group. One man riding slow like he belonged there. That alone told Dina this wasn't muscle. This was intent. He stopped a few yards short of her porch, didn't dismount right away. Let the horse settle. Let the moment breathe. Men who understand power know timing matters more than force. "You've been a problem a long time," he said finally. Dina stayed seated. "That's funny," she replied. "I ain't moved." He smiled thin. "Exactly." He slid down from the horse and rested a hand on the saddle, casual, practiced. "World-changing," he continued. "Folks like you get left behind, or cleaned up." Dina studied him, not his face, his posture, the way his weight favored one side, the way his eyes checked the road behind him, not in fear but in habit. He wasn't alone, not close, but near enough. "You here to kill me," Dina said calmly, "or scare me into disappearing?" He chuckled. "Depends how you answer the next question." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "You willing to be quiet," he asked, "for whatever time you got left?" Dina leaned forward, scars catching the fading light, voice low and steady. "You boys still don't get it," she said. "Quiet is what made me dangerous." The rider's smile faded. That's when Dina heard it, not from the road, from behind the house. A soft step where there shouldn't have been one. Her pulse didn't change, but her focus did. Because whoever had made this move believed they'd finally found the angle. And angles only work when the board is misread. Dina stood slowly. The rider's hand dropped closer to his side. Somewhere behind the house, someone shifted again, too close now to be coincidence. And Dina understood, with perfect clarity, that this wasn't about her surviving anymore. It was about whether the story would end with a whisper, or with a name everyone remembered. She took one step forward, and the night leaned in to see who would move next. She didn't turn toward the sound. That's how you know someone has lived long enough in danger to understand it. Turning is a giveaway. Turning tells them you're surprised. Dina stayed facing the rider. "I hear you," she said, voice rough, unhurried. "Both of you." The rider's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected confusion, fear, a plea. Behind the house, the soft step stopped. Silence stretched thin as wire. "You got no business sneaking," Dina continued, eyes still locked on the man in front of her. "If you here to finish it, then finish it standing." The rider glanced past her just for a fraction of a second. That was the tell. Whoever was behind the house mattered more than he did. "Old woman," he said, trying to reclaim control, "you don't get to set terms." Dina took another slow step forward. "You've been letting me set terms for years," she replied. "That's why you nervous." The rider's hand twitched. Behind the house a shadow shifted. A boot scraped wood, too loud now, too close. Someone had lost patience. Dina exhaled through her nose, steadying herself. Her jaw throbbed. Her scars pulled tight like they remembered the iron all over again. This was the moment, not the fight, not the violence. The reveal. "Before you do what you came to do," she said quietly, "you might want to ask yourself why I'm still here." The rider hesitated. That hesitation cost him. A voice cut through the dusk from down the road. Not one voice. Several, familiar, alert. Lantern light flared. The rider cursed under his breath. Behind the house, footsteps scrambled, retreating now fast and ungraceful. Dina smiled, just enough. "See," she said, "I ain't been alone in a long time." The rider backed away, eyes darting, calculations collapsing. "This ain't over," he muttered. Dina nodded once. "I know," she said. "That's why you leaving." He mounted fast, spurred the horse hard, disappeared into the dark without another word. The road filled with voices now. Neighbors, watchers. People who'd learned when to come running and when to stay put. Dina stood in the fading light, breathing slow, letting the moment settle into memory. Because she knew something they didn't. Tonight wasn't the end, it was confirmation. They were running out of ways to deal with her quietly, and men who can't be quiet don't stay patient for long. Somewhere out there, a new plan was already forming, and the next time they came, they wouldn't be testing. They'd be desperate. Desperation changes the rules. It doesn't plan wide. It plans fast. The nights after that felt crowded, even when the road stayed empty. Dina could feel eyes that weren't there yet. The kind that arrive before bodies do. The kind that belong to men who have decided patience is a luxury they can't afford anymore. She adjusted, not by hiding, by tightening the circle. People stopped coming by chance. They came on purpose, always two at a time, always at different hours. No patterns you could map clean. Someone was always awake now. Someone was always listening. Dina slept less, not from fear, from awareness. When you've broken iron, rest feels optional. One evening, as dusk folded itself into shadow, Mabel returned without warning. No announcement, no signal. She just appeared at the edge of the yard like she'd stepped out of memory itself. Dina knew before she turned around. "Something moved," Mabel said quietly. No greeting, no relief, just fact. Dina nodded. "It always does when it's boxed." "They're arguing," Mabel continued. "Not about weather, about how loud." That was the most dangerous sentence yet. Loud meant spectacle. Loud meant examples. Loud meant someone wanted to remind everybody else how small they still were. Dina leaned back in her chair, jaw aching, eyes steady. "They won't risk a crowd again," she said. "Too many eyes now." Mabel shook her head. "That's not what they think." Silence fell between them, heavy, loaded. Dina stood slowly, her body complained, she ignored it. "Then they changed targets," she said. Mabel looked at her mother, the understanding landing hard. "They won't come for you," Mabel said. "They'll come for what you protect." Dina didn't answer right away. She walked to the edge of the yard and stared down the road. The same road that had carried threats, witnesses, retreats. "They already tried my child," she said finally. "That didn't end right for them." Mabel swallowed. "They'll try something smaller, someone quieter, someone they think won't echo." That's how power regains confidence, by hurting people it believes won't be remembered. Dina closed her eyes for a long breath. "This ain't about me no more," she said. "It's about the lesson." Mabel stepped closer. "Then what do we do?" Dina opened her eyes, and for the first time in a long while there was something new there, not defiance, not survival, intent. "We make sure," she said, voice low and exact, "that whoever they touch next becomes louder than me." The wind shifted. Somewhere down the road a door slammed, not close, not far, a sound that didn't belong to the night. Dina felt it settle into her bones. The desperate don't knock, They strike where they think nobody's watching. And someone somewhere was about to find out just how wrong that assumption could be. They didn't come for Dina, that was the tell. The scream reached town just after midnight. One sharp sound cut short, not close enough to hear words, close enough to know it wasn't an accident. Dina was already standing when the sound faded. "East Road," she said. No question. A statement. Mabel grabbed her coat. "That's Mrs. Carter's place. Widow keeps to herself. Son works the mill. No protection. No audience." Exactly the kind of target desperate men pick when they want control back without a crowd. They moved fast but not reckless. Others were already moving too. Lanterns flared in windows. Doors opened. Boots hit dirt because Dina had been right. Someone was always listening now. They reached the Carter house to find the door hanging open, one hinge split clean. Inside, furniture overturned. Blood on the floor. Mrs. Carter alive, shaking, held together by neighbors who'd gotten their seconds sooner than planned. Too soon for the men who came to teach a lesson. Too late for quiet. "They said," Mrs. Carter choked, "they said this what happens when folks don't mind they place." Dina crouched in front of her, scarred face steady in lantern light. "Did you see them?" she asked. Mrs. Carter nodded weakly. "Two, one scar on his neck." Dina straightened slowly. That detail mattered. That meant repeat players. That meant arrogance. Mabel was already speaking to others, voice calm, organizing without raising it. Someone ran for the constable, someone else for the mill foreman. Names moved faster than fear. Dina stepped back into the night, breathing deep, jaw aching, anger controlled. They wanted an example. They made one. Just not the one they planned. Because by morning, the story wouldn't be about Dina again. It would be about a house that got touched and didn't stay quiet. And somewhere out there, two men were about to learn the last lesson desperate power never wants to teach. You don't control a town by hurting one of its quiet ones. You wake it up, and once it's awake, it doesn't go back to sleep. By sunrise, the town had a pulse again, not panic, purpose. Men stood in doorways they used to pass without noticing. Women spoke to one another in tones that didn't ask permission. Names were repeated out loud on purpose so they couldn't be swallowed later. Two men, one scarred neck, East Road, past midnight. That was enough to start a chain. Dina didn't lead it. That mattered. Leaders get targeted. Witnesses get protected. She stayed visible but still. Let others move. Let others speak. That's how you make something last longer than one voice. By mid-morning, word came back from the mill. One worker hadn't shown, scar on his neck, temper nobody trusted, always bragging about friends outside town. By noon, the constable had a second name, someone who drank too much, talked too freely, left town before dawn. Running means guilt to people who have lived long enough to recognize it. Dina sat on her porch and listened to it all arrive in pieces. Each piece clicked into place like she'd already seen the picture. Mabel watched her closely. "You knew it, D-turn," she said. Dina nodded. "Pressure always does." "What if they come again?" Mabel asked. Dina looked out at the road, quiet now but alert. "They won't," she said. "Not like before." "Why?" "Because now," Dina replied, "they ain't dealing with me. They dealing with memory." That afternoon, the scarred neck man was found hiding in a barn 2 towns over. Not brave, not defiant. Just tired and scared and suddenly aware he'd been miscalculated. He didn't fight when they took him. That's how you know a man never believed his own power, only the silence around it. By evening, the second man was gone for good. Left behind boots, left behind a trail, left behind enough fear to make sure nobody tried to take his place. Dina stood as the sun dropped again, same place she always stood, watching the town settle into a new kind of quiet, not the old one. This one had eyes open. Mabel joined her, shoulder to shoulder. "They didn't erase you," she said. Dina shook her head slowly. "No," she replied. "They taught me something instead." "What?" Dina's voice dropped, rough and certain. "That power don't survive exposure. It survives silence." The wind moved through the road like it was carrying that sentence somewhere else. Somewhere farther. Somewhere it would be needed next. Because the kind of story Dina had lived through never really ends. It just waits for the next place that thinks it can get away with the same mistake. The town didn't celebrate what happened. That's how you know it was real. No speeches, no cheers, just a subtle shift in posture, people standing a little straighter, doors staying open a little longer, conversations no longer stopping when certain names came up. Silence had changed sides. Dina felt it the same way she always felt: danger by its absence. When power loses its grip, it doesn't vanish. It relocates. It looks for softer ground. That's what worried her. She sat on the porch as night came down again, slower this time. The road held its shape, but something in it felt unfinished, like a sentence that hadn't found its ending yet. Mabel noticed it too. "You feel that?" she asked. Dina nodded once. "They didn't lose," she said. "They adjusted." Far off, a train horn cut through the dark. Long, low, not passing through town, stopping nearby. That mattered. Trains bring people who don't know local rules, people who don't care about old witnesses, people paid to do things clean or loud depending on the need. Dina stood. Her jaw ached harder now, like her body was remembering ahead of time. The scars pulled tight, familiar and unwelcome. "Pack light," she told Mabel. "Not to run, to be ready." "For what?" Mabel asked. Dina didn't answer right away. She watched the faint glow on the horizon where the tracks cut through the trees. "For the kind of trouble," she said finally, "that don't ask permission and don't leave witnesses by accident." The horn sounded again, closer this time. And somewhere out there, beyond the edge of town, someone was stepping off a train with instructions that didn't include Dina's name yet. Which meant they were about to learn it. The train didn't roll into town like it belonged there. It sighed to a stop, metal-tired, brakes screaming just enough to announce that whatever stepped off wasn't planning to stay long. Dina watched from the edge of the road, far enough to see without being seen. Mabel stood beside her, quiet, alert, eyes tracking movement the way she'd been taught. 3 men stepped down. Not locals. You could tell by the way they looked around, measuring instead of remembering. One wore a coat too clean for the dust. One kept his hands empty on purpose. The third didn't look at anything except reflections. Professionals, that was new. Local power had failed, so they'd outsourced the problem. Dina felt no fear, just confirmation. "Different kind of trouble," Mabel murmured. "Yes," Dina said. "More expensive." The men spoke briefly with someone from the rail yard. No names exchanged, just instructions passed like packages. Then they split, one toward town, one toward the trees, one straight down the road that led past Dina's house. That one mattered. Dina stepped back into the shadows before he could clock her. She didn't need to test him. She already understood the assignment. End the witness. No crowd. No echo. The man walked steady, not rushed, not cautious. Confidence built on repetition. He stopped once, just once, and looked around like he felt something shift. Dina was already behind him, not close enough to touch, close enough to be heard. "You late," she said. The man froze, slowly turned. His eyes went to her scars first. That was the mistake. He didn't look at her posture, didn't look at Mabel in the dark behind her, already moving. "You Dina," he said. "That depends," she replied. "Who asking?" He smiled thin. "People who want this wrapped up." Dina nodded. They should have come themselves. He glanced past her, scanning for backup that wasn't coming. "This don't need to be loud." Dina stepped forward just enough for the lantern light to catch her face fully. "No," she agreed. "It needs to be final." That's when Mabel's voice cut in, calm, precise. "Before you decide," she said, "you should know this already left town." The man's smile vanished. "What did?" Mabel held up nothing, just air. "Your arrival," she said. "Your route, your employer." Silence hit hard. Dina watched the calculation happen in his eyes: kill them both, walk away, or leave with the knowledge that this job had teeth. He took a step back. "You made yourself bigger than you needed to be," he said. Dina shook her head slowly. "You made me necessary." The man looked at her one last time, then turned and walked away, fast now, not running but close. Dina exhaled, because she knew the truth he'd just learned too late. This wasn't a cleanup anymore. It was damage control. And damage control always ends one of two ways. Either the truth disappears or it gets paid for. The train horn sounded again in the distance, long, low, impatient. And somewhere between that sound and the dark road ahead, the final move was already being forced. The train left before dawn, not announced, not explained, just gone. By the time light found the tracks, there were no men waiting, no wagons circling, no strangers pretending they belonged. Whatever orders had been given the night before were revised in the dark. That's how endings really happen, not with noise, with recalculation. Dina stood on the porch as morning settled in, jaw aching, scars tight, body tired in a way that felt earned. The road looked the same as it always had, but it had memory now. Mabel joined her, eyes on the horizon where the train smoke had thinned into nothing. "They won't try again," she said. "Not hope, assessment." Dina nodded once. "Not here." "Why?" "Because this place costs too much," Dina replied. "And power don't like expensive lessons." They stood there a long moment, letting the quiet prove itself. Not the old quiet, the kind that hid violence, but the new one, the kind that comes after witnesses survive. Later that day, word drifted in from 2 towns over. The men who'd stepped off the train never finished their work. One quit. One vanished back into contracts nobody wanted to sign. The third asked too many questions and got none answered. No bodies, no trials, just doors closing. Dina didn't smile when she heard it. She didn't need to. She'd never wanted revenge, she wanted permanence. By evening the town moved like it always had, shops closing, voices calling children home, but something subtle had shifted. People didn't lower their voices around her anymore. They didn't look past her, they looked to her, not for permission, for confirmation. Mabel noticed it. "You changed the shape of things." Dina shook her head. "No, I refuse to disappear." The sun dropped low, painting the road gold, then shadow. Dina sat, breathing slow, feeling the ache in her jaw, the pull of old scars, proof she'd paid the price and kept the receipt. Some stories end with justice, some end with fire. Hers ended with something rarer, a witness who outlived the threat. Somewhere far away, men who once believed iron and silence could solve any problem moved on to easier targets. New towns, new names, same mistakes. They didn't come back, and Dina stayed, not as a warning, not as a legend, but as something far more dangerous to power. A woman who saw the whole board, moved when it mattered, and proved that once a voice survives being caged, it never really belongs to silence again.